Historically, many Western Native Americans crafted short and powerful composite bows that were heavily used in mounted hunting and warfare. Owing to some similarities in construction and commonality in purpose, these bows are sometimes compared to the more complex composite models found in Asia. At least in terms of long distance performance, the comparison strongly favors the Asiatic designs due to their longer possible draw lengths. Yet, it should be said that the native bows were fit for purpose. They did the job they were made to do, serving as tools in both wilderness survival and on the battlefield. And clearly, they did that job very well. Nonetheless, I wanted to ask an interesting hypothetical question. If the natives who controlled the plains or west coast had somehow gotten access to Asiatic composite bows, what would they have thought of them? Putting aside the obvious problems of historical plausibility, I think many Western tribes would have certainly admired these exotic creations that, at least in spirit, were rather reminiscent of their own bows. For example, Shoshone bowmakers from the Yellowstone area had a long tradition of using sinew and sheep horn. This required great patience to carefully carve, heat, and tiller the horn. The result was a very small, yet surprisingly powerful weapon. Upon being shown a wood, horn, and sinew composite bow with static recurved tips, they might very well have taken a liking to it. If the additional complexity in construction resulted in a worthwhile increase in performance, they might have even successfully replicated one using their existing materials and expertise, and then taken their complex new creation on a hunt or into battle. But bows were not just practical implements, they were also objects of prestige. The indigenous horn bows were very expensive trade items, especially among the warlike tribes from the nearby Great Plains. In addition to the Shoshone, such bows were made or at least acquired by tribes such as the Crow, Mandan, Arikara, and Cheyenne. So, in this cultural context, the mounted warriors and hunters of the West would most likely have considered Asiatic style bows to be a sign of wealth and prowess, as well as lethal weapons. For those that could afford to adopt the Asiatic horn bows, one adaptation that would most likely have been forced upon them would have been the shape of their quiver. The typical plains quiver had a compartment for the arrows and a separate sheath for the unbraced bow, protecting it from the elements. Whether strung or unbraced, the highly reflexed Asian bow shape is not particularly amenable to this narrow bow sheath design. So perhaps in time, the Plains Indians would have adopted a hip-mounted bow case, crafted out of their traditional materials, such as otter or mountain lion skin. But they might also have simply adopted a wider-mouthed back or side quiver, similar to what some tribes already used, and also much akin to what is depicted in some Assyrian artwork. Regarding the shooting technique, the short Asiatic bows were traditionally associated with the use of the thumb draw. However, the short Asiatic composites can also be used with a 2 or 3 finger Mediterranean draw. This method of release was used all across the Americas, for example by the Inuit, the Apache, and by some Amazonian tribes. But the most common native draw techniques were various mutations of the so-called secondary or tertiary release. One historical account describes the use of this method by an aging Navajo warrior. With the right hand, he seized the proximal end of the arrow in the string, using the thumb and index finger. The ring finger bore against the string below this seizure, and its pressure was reinforced by the middle digit. The arrow at its head was on the left side of the bow and simply rested on top of his clenched hand. My personal experience is that when drawing short Asiatic bows, the secondary draw is much more comfortable than the Mediterranean draw, as the fingers do not easily become squeezed or crushed by the sharp angle of the string. So, in the absence of an obvious and compelling reason for change, it appears that the traditional release methods of the Americas would most likely have persevered and served their users very well. One very important question to ask is whether or not a change in bow technology would have brought about changes in tactics or cultural attitudes towards battle. The common image of Plains Indians in film is of warriors wearing scant clothing and engaging in individualistic skirmishes. However, historical accounts indicate that this was actually a relatively recent development, coinciding with the introduction of firearms which could pierce all known forms of armor. Prior to this, there is ample evidence that tribes all across the continent made extensive use of thick rawhide helmets and shields, as well as leather or cotton cuirasses. They would also confront one another in large numbers, not unlike the major battles of Europe. They anticipated being shot at with large numbers of arrows, and thus they went to great lengths to protect themselves. As such, it is unclear what difference the introduction of more powerful or more efficient bows would have made. The ability of the Asiatic composite bows to defeat well made native armor is an unknown, but both modern tests and contemporary accounts indicate that, in principle, leather and textile armor and shields can be surprisingly effective against arrows. For example, during the Crusades, one knight was able to use a gambeson as a shield, protecting himself against a hail of arrows shot from Arab bows, such that he only received a number of minor wounds. So perhaps more potent bow designs would have merely led to further reinforced armor. But it's also important to keep in mind that, like the native horn bows, these foreign ones would have been very expensive, and they might not have been used in great enough numbers to have a significant effect. Moreover, the knowledge of how to make much simpler kinds of bows was extremely common, as they were frequently necessary for survival in the wilderness. This could include both simple composites as well as short bows made entirely out of wood. Ishi would be a great example of this kind of raw independence. If you were to have given Ishi an extremely short Turkish or Korean bow and asked him to compare it to his own, he might have said, "This is a really good, lightweight bow. It's well made and it's of a sensible length. It can be carried through the woods and the brush with great stealth. It's very quick, and if I ever want to shoot an arrow with extra power, I can pull it very far back without much fear of it breaking." But, Ishi might have said, "I am a very individualistic and self sufficient sort of person. For significant parts of my life, I have lived completely alone in the forest. If this amazing bow breaks, I don't have the correct materials, generations of accumulated knowledge, or time to make another one like it. As a gift, this Asiatic bow is wonderful, and I will put it to good use, but it would be best if I kept making my own sinew and juniper short bows. They might not be fancy, but they are very capable of taking down any deer or rabbit. For my purposes, they are perfect." The example of Ishi really encapsulates my feelings on this hypothetical subject. Despite the introduction of a superior design, the Asiatic composites would most likely have served as exotic items of prestige. The highly practical indigenous bow making traditions would have doubtless persisted. They were crucial for survival and still extremely fearsome in the hands of a skilled archer. It's a great example of how sometimes simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication.